Okay, I see it's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to call the February 8th meeting of the Shelby Township Planning Commission to order. I will ask the secretary to call the roll. And as a reminder, when you announce your presence, please indicate what community that you're residing in taking this Zoom call.
Ms. Gonzalez?
Here, Shelby Township.
Mr. Meredith?
Here, Shelby Township.
Mr. Turner?
Here, Shelby Township.
Mr. Snyder?
Here, Shelby Township.
Mr. Grott?
Here, Shelby Township.
Shelby Township.
Mr. Apone?
Here, Shelby Township.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Great. And I'm here and taking the call in Shelby Township, and I'm happy that Mr. Apone is so excited to announce his attendance that he jumped the gun a little. Okay, first item is approval of the agenda, if there are no corrections.
So move. Support.
Moved by Turner, support by Meredith. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 And carries. Next is approval of the minutes from the January 25th meeting.
So move.
So move.
Moved by Turner, support by Moore. Any questions or comments on the motion, on the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, this evening we've got two items. Actually, both items we've have been before this body before. The first, a rezoning request and site plan request, David Rickard, Shelby Commerce Center. If you recall this, we had conducted a public hearing on this a few weeks ago. It was postponed with some questions, and the petitioner has come back with some amendments and some comments. So I'll ask the petitioner if or representative if they are here and to proceed. So name and address and what it is you have to tell this body.
Great. So you've got David Rickard here with North Point. Address is 4825 Northwest 41st Street, Riverside, Missouri, 64150. And I'll start out just giving some introductory comments, and then my colleague Mark will actually present some of the changes to the site plan that we've made. So our team has been working on this project probably since I would say early last year. Engaged the community in the October timeframe once we felt we had a proposal that worked for all parties. Obviously, come to the realization that we needed a lot more work there. So after multiple meetings and also calls, feedback from the community, and then also feedback from, the public body here, have revised the site plan. So you guys will see, significant revisions to the site plan, setbacks, and so on and so forth, sort of operating within the confines of the future land use and then also the restrictive covenant. So our team, I hope the Planning Commission and also residents will note the significant changes that have occurred to the site plan. And so I'll turn it over to Mark. But at the end of the day, we look forward to working with the residents and then also Shelby Township to make this project a reality.
Okay,
Thanks, David.
Yep.
My name's Mark Gloyeski with North Point Development. Address is 4805 Montgomery Road, Suite 310, Cincinnati, Ohio 45212. And I'm going to share my screen here if that's okay.
Sure.
Does somebody need to give me permission to share that?
Chelsea, can you allow Mr. Gloyeski to share his screen, please? Give me just 1 second. Let me give her a call.
Okay, thanks.
And professional students with or college two campus mandatory testing start
Unless you're called upon, could you please mute your phone?
Vaccine please this week shows throughout the state.
Can you mute your phone, your screen if you're not called on? I see a number. Thank you. Is one.
Julie, are you able to hear me now?
And then some.
Sorry.
Yes.
I can allow Mark to share his screen, but it'll open it for all participants if you're fine with that for the time being.
That's fine, Chelsea. Thank you.
Can you just please monitor it so when he's done, then just cut it off?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, go ahead. Okay.
Perfect. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Great. All right. So as David mentioned, I will be running through a few quick slides here to kind of illustrate what we have changed on this this proposed development. So again, we're all familiar with this site location on 23 Mile Road. This slide here we presented at the last hearing, but I do want to call your attention to the bottom section just to reiterate a couple items specifically regarding the future of this property. So there is environmental contamination here, and Ford at the closing of this property is going to record a restrictive covenant that doesn't allow residential development here. And secondly, this proposed redevelopment is in accordance with the Shelby Township 2017 master plan, which we will get into a little bit later in the presentation. This slide here shows the new building layout, which I will get into some of the specifics that we changed here in a few slides, but it shows the relation to the zoning surrounding this property. So east and west is zoned heavy manufacturing. North of this is zoned light manufacturing, and then the residential is the east of the south. And again, we showed these last time, but some of the architectural elevations that are typical for our industrial buildings. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the original concept plan and the new concept plan. So the plan on the left here is the plan that we presented to you guys at the January public hearing. And the plan on the right is the updated concept plan. The main change that we made here for tonight is we were able to take another look at the plan, and we actually reduced the overall lengths of building 1 and building 3. And what that allowed us to do was increase the building setback and increase the buffer yard from that southern property line, which is where the residential properties are. So we took the building setback from 145 feet at building 1 to 249 feet, and then at 216 feet at building 3 to 267 feet. And we were able to increase the overall buffer yard width from 90 feet to 147 feet at building 3 and 170 feet at building 1. The other thing that this allowed us to do was increase the berm height. So if you recall, we were proposing a 10-foot tall landscape berm with a 10-foot tall privacy fence on top of it in the original concept plan. This additional buffer yard width actually allowed us to take that berm height to 18 to 22 feet with an average of 19 and a half feet along the entire southern property line. And we kept that 10-foot tall fence on top. So our overall height now is, an average of 28 to 32 feet across that entire southern property line. The other thing that we did is we took another look at the building design, and we incorporated what we call dog ears on the truck dock sides of these buildings. So on the cross dock buildings, we incorporated them on the north and the south. And on the single load building, building 1, we incorporated it on both the north and the south. And what these do is they're protrusions of the buildings that stick out an extra 60 feet. And they're designed to shield the trucks as they're backed up into the loading dock area. So it provides some additional screening, both visually and screening from the light and the sound that happens while these trucks are being loaded and unloaded. And for just to illustrate what those look like, this is an aerial picture of one of our buildings in Kansas City that incorporates these dog ear protrusions of the building. So you can see that it's just additional office space that sticks out approximately 60 feet from the building and blocks the trucks as they're backed into this truck court area. And this picture is a pretty good representation of the residential backing up to the industrial and what those homeowners see in this particular instance. And it'll be very similar to what this development will look like. To further help illustrate the differences that this additional setback and the additional berming made, we've taken a look at the cross sections that we presented last time compared to what the cross sections are today based on our updated grading plan and the setback. So this is an illustration here of what the residents will see as they're looking at building 3 from the south. So the bottom cross section was from the presentation at the January public hearing meeting. So you can see here the proximity of this truck road to the residential property line, and you can see the sight line of the residences where they were seeing about the top third of those industrial buildings. Now, as you go to the top cross section, this is what it would look like based on the plan we're presenting tonight. So again, you can see the magnitude of that berm increase. It didn't only get taller, it also got wider. The setback of this, the main roadway from the property line increased. The setback from the building increased. And you can see that sight line now as you're looking from this residential property. You actually look over the top of that building. So it's a pretty significant increase in both view and sound as we'll get into here shortly. Same concept on this slide, except this is looking at building 1 from the south. So again, bottom cross section was the original concept plan. The top cross section is with the proposed, the increased setback, the increased berm height. And again, these residences will be looking over the top of that proposed industrial building. We updated our photometric study based on this new concept plan. The dark line that you see is the boundary of the 0-foot candles that the light from this development will produce. And the blue line is the original concept plan. So as you can see, specifically along the south where the berm is increased, the light spread becomes even farther from those residential properties based on the new concept plan. We also went back to our consultant who prepared our sound study for us. So I took 3 snapshots here to illustrate the changes that we've made to the plan over time. So upper left-hand corner here was what we presented at the neighborhood meeting that we held back in October. And that was just with the 6-foot berm, no fence. And you can see this yellow, the sound line traveled pretty far into the residential neighborhood. The bottom left is what we presented at the January public hearing meeting with the 10-foot tall berm and the 10-foot tall fence. You can see it's a significant improvement over the 6-foot berm. And then the picture on the right is what we're presenting here tonight with the 18 to 20 foot tall berm and the 10-foot fence. Helps further limit the spread of the sound that's over 65 decibels. And again, this was presented at the last meeting, but it's just a good illustration of decibel levels compared to everyday household items. Our air quality study didn't change based on the updated concept plan. We're still well below the forecasted annual emission requirements that are limited by the Michigan air quality requirements. And the traffic impact study didn't change. Ingress and egress into the site and out of the site didn't change. Access to 53 didn't change based on this new concept plan. One thing that I wanted to get into tonight was some discussions about the criteria that Shelby Township has to evaluate each zoning request on. So the Shelby Township zoning ordinance states that the commission needs to evaluate each zoning request on 4 criteria. Those are 1, the practicality of the request and the effect on the neighboring property owners or on the surrounding area. 2, the owner's right to use his land. 3, do current growth and development patterns warrant this rezoning? And 4, is the proposed rezoning in accordance with the Shelby Township master plan? We feel that the Shelby Commerce Center development does meet all 4 of those criteria. Our proposed zoning is compatible with the uses on the east, west, and the north sides of this property. And we've greatly exceeded the required minimums in the township code for building setback, berming, and landscaping in order to help reduce the impact of the residents on the south. Secondly, the owner currently has no ability to develop this property based on the current zone due to the environmental contamination. Therefore, we feel that the existing zoning classification is not appropriate. This proposed concept plan that we're presenting and the proposed zoning that we are requesting is consistent with the restrictive covenant that will be filed on this property. Third, Class A industrial vacancy rates in this area have seen incredible demand and a big drop in the availability of warehouse space. We feel that this location, both from an access point and a labor perspective, provides a really good opportunity for this type of product. And in fact, research done by the Detroit Regional Partnership has shown that transportation and warehousing industry jobs have increased by 55.8% since 2016. And in 2020, the research showed that warehouse buildings over 50,000 square feet in Macomb County only had a 1.5% vacancy rate. So this product is highly in demand in this general region. And lastly, this proposed zoning classification meets what's in the Shelby Township 2017 master plan. The land use map in that master plan identifies this land use as light industrial. And in fact, page 66 goes on to state that the township should consider rezoning this property from residential R12 and R1C to light manufacturing because of the environmental contamination that is present on this property. So in summary, this is an environmentally contaminated site that's in need of redevelopment. It can't be redeveloped using residential development techniques due to the environmental contamination that's presented and the restrictive covenant that will be filed on the property. We've revised our plan. We've listened to the township comments. We've listened to the public comments, and we've revised our plan to help increase the building setback, help increase the buffering, and change the building design to help mitigate the sound and the light shed to the south. Our proposed use is conformant with the future land use plan in the township, and our landscaping, berming, and lighting exceed the township requirements in this area, and we meet all 4 criteria required to qualify for a zone change, and based on the Shelby Township ordinance. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that the Planning Commission has tonight. Thank you for your time.
Okay, great. Thank you. If you could unshare your screen.
Yep.
And mute yourself. Thank you. Okay. So our last meeting was the public hearing on this request. A decision was made to postpone because there were a couple of items to which the petitioners, I think, addressed a majority of them. Then the board could follow back up with questions. I will, because this is such a big issue, allow some public comment. I'd really like it to be focused on the new information that was presented, not things that we discussed the last time. The purpose for the public hearing is for this body to hear sort of both sides, both arguments, plus the things that we intuitively and just our experiences bring to making a decision and then offering a recommendation ultimately to the township board. It's been communicated that there are 4 individuals, and I think these folks had also addressed the body the last time as sort of representatives of the association wanted to address. So I'll call those 4 individuals. And again, if we could try to stick with some of the new information that was presented, not sort of rehash some of the old things, because we heard the arguments on both sides, and I think we're an intelligent enough body that will sort of figure those things out when we ultimately make the recommendation. So I'm going to start off with Mike Malone. Is Mike on the call?
Good morning, Mr. Moffett, or good afternoon, Mr. Moffett. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mike Malone, 49316 St. Nicholas, Shelby Township, Michigan. I am the current president of the Central Park Masters Association. Just to touch a couple things, one of my questions is the fence. I've heard everything from just a wooden fence to a plastic fence to what kind of makeup is that going to be? We'd like to see, if this is approved, some kind of stone decorative fence, similar to what Ford has down in Dearborn area around their property. And
I believe what they've proposed is a composite fence, but we're not approving it at this step of the process. This is sort of preliminary. We're evaluating whether it has merit or not. It then goes to the board. If they agree, then it'll come back here. And a lot of more of those sort of specific details. I mean, this is pretty close, but what they've and maybe before the end of this call, I'll have them pull up what they've proposed, because there is a rendering somewhere in our packets.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And then secondly, I'm kind of disappointed by the petitioner not giving us during the October meeting the covenant. There was no issue. Nothing was spoken to the residents about this covenant. This is all new information that came out in the last public hearing. So, and lastly, I just want to ask our residents to follow what you said, Mr. Chair, about the comments, so we can make this meeting timely. And I know we only want to spend 1 hour this evening, but
I mean, we're here for as long as the call takes. But
yes,
but the thing is that last time it was the national championship game, so
yes, sir.
I got all the time in the world now.
Yes, sir.
But I think just to be respectful of everybody's time and respectful of a process.
Yeah,
I think.
Yep, that's the only reason I'm just asking the residents to follow what you instructed, and also just follow what we've got from the association standpoint. So I'll turn over to the next speaker.
Okay, thank you. Mike Grobel.
My name is Mike Grobel, and I reside at 49997 Lexington Avenue East, Shelby Township. I'd just like to comment on the subject of transparency, particularly as it relates to the land use planning history of these 79 acres. Back at the January 11th public hearing, we were surprised to learn that a restrictive covenant had been placed on these parcels. The covenant restricts its development to a much more intense land use than the current zoning, effectively prohibiting the land from ever being developed as residential. We've since learned that the state legislature authorized such restrictions under Part 201 of Act 451, which is Michigan's environmental cleanup statute. There's a section inside of Part 201 that obligates the property owner to provide notice of their land use restrictive covenants to the state and to the local zoning authority within 30 days after recording them with the Register of Deeds. Nothing in there, those mentioned about also notifying adjacent property owners. So it's expected that a restrictive covenant would be disclosed to a prospective purchaser of the land, such as North Point. Yet it was never mentioned by them when North Point met with our residents back at the meeting over at Riverbends on October 1st. The state, the township, and the petitioner should have known about Ford's restrictive covenant prior to that meeting last fall. Yet its existence was never disclosed to any of us. And in fact, it wasn't even mentioned in the general public hearing on the 11th until after the close of the public comment portion of the hearing. So this lack of transparency surrounding a legal method that effectively upzones the existing residentially zoned planned unit development that was in this 79 acres, it's really just the latest insult to the residents of Central Park. The ink could have barely been dry on the township's approval for that planned unit development when on December 19th in 2006, Grand Saco closed on their purchase from Ford of all but one of the 8 parcels that were needed to make up this residential sub. From that point on, Grand Saco knew that they couldn't develop that subdivision as shown in the planned unit development that had been approved. Meanwhile, Ford continued to own that excluded parcel even to this day. Following the widespread publicity back in 2012 about groundwater contamination beneath Grand Saco's 7 parcels, Ford eventually bought them back from Grand Saco on November 8th, 2013. Once Ford had possession of all 8 parcels, they were in a position then to record the allowable land use restrictions with the County Register of Deeds office. Yet throughout all these years, the planned unit development's residential subdivision has continued to be shown on the township's planning maps. Now, the Central Park residents have known that these 79 acres were a troubled property and that the proposed subdivision that was shown there was always subject to change. And they're also aware that there's always a risk of change for any vacant property in terms of what its land use might eventually become. But they were never even given a hint that Grand Saco's planned unit development was flawed from the get-go, much less that it become a subject to a restrictive covenant that prohibits any residential development. So I'm sure everybody's followed the letter of law over these past years regarding disclosures about these changes that have impacted the planned use for these 79 vacant acres. Yet I'm also just as sure that with more transparency, additional information could and should have been provided to the public. The township took a calculated risk back in the early 2000s when they agreed to rezone 265 acres in our section 21 from industrial to residential by approving Grand Saco's 2 planned unit developments. That gamble turned out to be an opaque, slow motion failure for the northerly planned unit development, which went undeveloped, while at the same time, the subdivisions in the southerly Central Park planned unit development continued to build out. So, in conclusion, we apparently find ourselves here in a situation where the residents of Central Park have to pretend that their voices matter with respect to this proposed zoning, while the Planning Commission and Board of Trustees will pretend that they have anything more than a rubber stamp in authorizing North Point's proposed rezoning. However, since this is a planned unit development proposal, the township can and must negotiate site plan conditions that will mitigate the negative impacts that North Point's proposed land use will have on the existing residential, recreational, and commercial developments in Section 21. Thank you.
Sandy McLeod.
Yeah, my name is legally Hugh McLeod. I live at 50124 Blado Court in Central Park, and I'm about 300 feet from the parcels at issue. And I want to follow up to my comments at the last meeting regarding the economic impact analysis.
Okay, by extending a bit of latitude on, I mean, is this some new information, or are you just going to repeat the things that we heard the last time?
No, what I wanted to do is respond to a comment or an observation by one of the representatives from North Point Development.
I also don't want to use this as an opportunity to sort of go sort of a back and forth debate. I mean, this body is astute enough to understand the positions that the position that the petitioner may have made, and his statements, and didn't accept everything as sort of fact of what they said, and listen through it with some filtered ears. But go ahead.
Okay, no, that's all right. It's basically, I just wanted to reiterate the point that we will see the economic or the home values here in Central Park decline should this be rezoned to industrial, and it will take place over a period of years, not immediately. And that's why I'd suggested the first time through that the economic impact analysis be a 5 to 10 year look. But the comment by one of the North Point representatives was that, I don't see any impact by the Amazon operation. So I have a longer statement which I can send to you. If
no,
that's
go ahead. No, you go ahead. If go ahead and read it. I mean,
okay.
And there will be an opportunity also to present it to the board too.
Sure. Well, with that as kind of an intro, as I understand it, the main reason why residential housing prices have been strong in the past year or two, despite other possible mitigating factors, is that the market has been driven by a shortage of available properties and low interest rates, fundamentally a seller's market. Prices are always strong in that type of market. However, as the Georgia State University study we referenced in January shows, the values of residential properties adjacent to industrial operations steadily decline, but over a period of several years. And ruling out other factors, which don't necessarily apply to Central Park, such as crime or blight, the trigger is attributed to rezoning or the start of an industrial facility construction. And the decline continues and eventually reaches 15% at about the 10-year point, depending on how near the industrial site the residential property is situated. And again, the impact is on all properties situated within about 3/4 of a mile from the industrial operation. Now, the Amazon property has always been zoned as heavy industrial, and any impact on the values of adjacent homes by that zoning prior to the building and start of the Amazon operation would have already been in effect at that time for sales of Central Park homes. And since its startup, we won't know the full impact of the Amazon operation on Central Park home values, particularly those in the northwest corner, for several years. Only when properties begin to turn over in statistically significant numbers will we see the full impact. Undoubtedly, though, the Amazon impact would have been mitigated by the property directly north of Central Park being zoned residential. Now, rezoning that property to our north to industrial would significantly aggravate the impact of the Amazon operation, spreading it to all of Central Park, 787 homes. As before, we won't see the full impact for several years, but unless all the studies we mentioned in January are wrong, we will see it. Meanwhile, should the township rezone those parcels, most potential buyers of Central Park properties who do their due diligence will see that the property to our north is fully zoned industrial, a strong negative on their pluses, minuses checklists. And if there is eventually industrial facility construction, launch, and operations, Central Park sellers may be required to disclose on their seller's disclosure statement the effects of that industrial operation. The litmus test for those members of the board, North Point Development present tonight, is the answer to the question, would you buy a Central Park home adjacent to an active 24 hours per day, 7 days a week warehouse or distribution center operation? Assuming the likely answer being no, the only way a current Central Park resident is going to be able to sell their home is to price it heavily discounted compared to similar homes outside of Central Park. So in closing, I hope that you will recognize and demonstrate that you care deeply about the enormous contribution that Central Park as a community and its residents as individuals make to Shelby Township by not recommending approval of this industrial project and instead pursuing a development that is a win-win-win for all parties, Shelby Township, Central Park residents, and a non-industrial developer to our north. Thank you.
Okay. Jim Ertman.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I respect your idea of not rehashing some of the things we spoke about in the past, so I've shortened my comments considerably to eliminate that, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's just reasonable. I really just have one question. I would really like to have someone explain to me and to all of us how putting a major truck depot, which is what this is, in the backyards of Central Park homes, these are not just residences or condos, these are our homes. How does putting a major truck depot in our backyards improve our living conditions? I understand there may be some monetary gains in the businesses around, gas stations and restaurants and things like that, but the detriment that this is going to cause to our community is outstanding. So could someone please explain to me how this is going to make our lives better. Thank you.
Okay. If anyone in the audience wants to comment, and again, these comments, limit to the changes they've made in the berm, the 150 and the 29 feet, and to the thing, so the improvements for the site, for the sound and the noises that they've attempted to mitigate, because those are, as I see it, the main changes. I'm willing to entertain those questions, and if not, then I'll bring it back to the board for our questions. I'll ask the host, Chelsea, if you notice anybody, let me know, and if not, we'll move on.
We have, it looks like Sandra with her hand raised.
Okay.
Sandra, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. Anyways, my name is Sandy Rapak. I live at 50200 Bethesda Court, Shelby Township. Anyways, I just wanted you to know that I'm right on the berm. I'm maybe about 25, 30 feet away from the berm. And, excuse me, my court is on the east side, totally all the way to the east side. It's the last court. Anyway, so my question is, the berm seems like it goes straight to the tree line, if I'm correct. And I was wondering what effect we'd have, like for noise or whatever, from the sides coming off the end of the berm. So I don't know if something should be done there to curve it up a little bit. So that's kind of my main concern right now.
So out to the Mark, if you're listening. So your berm is going to go from sight line to from boundary line to boundary line?
Yeah, on the eastern property, it stops about where the tree line is. So there's a pretty dense tree line along the 4-field boundary. So it stops right as you get to that tree line. But the fence does continue to the property.
That's what I was wondering about, if some of the noise is going to come beyond like where the berm stops, or if it could go curve, just before the tree line. I don't know if that would help, or if there was a sound kind of fence put up there.
So our fence, again, does extend all the way to the eastern property line. The other thing about that east side is that's the non-truck court side. So that's what we call our rear load building. So that side only has vehicular traffic, so cars and trucks. So there will be no semis on that property. So the sound study shows that the effect of the truck doesn't actually extend to the east along that building there.
Okay.
So there's no sound.
I was kind of concerned about that. And also, do they plan on putting a lot of trees in the berm?
We do. Yes.
Okay. Because that would kind of help a little bit too.
Yeah. If this does go further, there will also be a landscaping plan that will get submitted, and that you'll have the opportunity to comment on.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Bill Carson.
There we go. Go ahead, Nancy.
This is Nancy Carson. I'm Bill Carson's wife. We live at 49980 Regent Street, Shelby Township, 48317. My question has to do with the restrictive covenant. And my question is that could it only be to change from residential to light industrial, or could it be changed to something like commercial or something like that? Is this the only option that's available via this restrictive covenant that's made with the state of Michigan?
Mr. Kirk, do you want to address it at all, even broadly, not even commenting so much on the specifics, or as much as you can, the specifics?
The restrictive covenants being put in place by the seller of the land because of the condition of the property. However, the township is not bound by that. Just because it says it's only for industrial, that doesn't mean the township has to rezone to that use. The property is restricted, but it has no effect on our zoning decision. If that helps.
So it could be zoned something other than this light industrial if someone came and negotiated with Ford to buy it for that other purpose? Is that am I understanding it correctly?
That's correct from what I remember with regard to the property, though it's probably not feasible to use it for anything else.
Yeah. So the environmental issues likely are going to restrict any kind of residential and maybe some commercial. But again, that's what Mr. Kirk is saying. That's really, frankly, not for the township so much to enforce, but there are other government bodies that will. Correct, Mr. Kirk?
That's correct.
Okay, then I have one other question. And I don't understand the environmental concerns completely, but I understand it has something to do with water. Will there be any disturbance made to what has been done to this property already to mitigate that when they do this construction?
Well, you have to maintain through engineering when you develop a property, any of the water, any of the materials on your site, you can't allow them to leach in. That's everyone has that restriction.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Denise Peruski.
My name is Denise Peruski. I live at 50193 Blado, Shelby Township. I am right behind the berm, and I see that now I'm going to be looking at a berm that's 19 feet high and 10 feet high with the wall. That's not going to be a great view for us. I was a Utica school bus driver for 30 years, and I know how loud a diesel engine is. In the dead of the night, say around 3 o'clock, do you really think that we are not going to hear the engines and the backup beepers from the many truck wells that you are proposing?
Like Amazon.
I also know about the fumes from the diesel fuel and the health problems it can cause, such as cancer. At the last meeting, there is a resident in tears because she has asthma and has a hard time breathing. This is how upset we are about this development. And I really am very upset about the money that we are going to lose on our condos if we try to sell it. We're not going to be able to try to sell it. There's got to be something else that you can put back there besides this building with all these trucks and everything. Oh, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Smith.
Hi, I live at 7052 Anderson Court, and I spoke last time, so I won't rehash all of my issues that I have, especially regarding the health and asthma that I have dealt with. But as a board, I think that your primary and fundamental concern should be what is best for the residents, as well as the economic well-being of the city. If you're looking at what's best for the residents, you have a responsibility to the people who live here to do what's in our best interest, not just the money that we'll bring into our city. You represent us in these decisions, and you are our voice. If you boost the economy, but your residents are miserable and end up moving away at a loss to themselves, you will suffer an economic loss because no one will want to live here. That is not in the best interest of our community. We will all be selling our property at a loss due to the valuation of our property decreasing, and you will also get lower taxes from those homes that are being valued less. If this is approved, I want your promise and assurance that our property values and taxes will automatically decrease by 15 to 20% immediately. Are you able to verify that this will take place? Secondly, I talked about the economic well-being of the city. There are clearly other alternatives that are less invasive than 720 semis per day and 120 parking bays for semis and diesel trucks. Why are these other options not being considered by the board? The fact is that there is other options and they are not being pursued, and that's preposterous and ludicrous. This should not even be being considered based on the pushback from the community that you've already received. You admitted that there's other alternatives for this land that is not industrial and are less invasive and that would be more attractive to the residents. Why aren't we pursuing recreational, which is much less invasive and won't decrease our property values and taxes? Last meeting, you mentioned that letters were sent and petitions were signed. Did the members read the letters? I'd like an answer to that. How many letters were sent? I would like that on the record. How many people signed the petitions? That was also not addressed. These numbers are important and they show the veracity and the exactly how the people in this subdivision are feeling. These numbers are important. Please list this information for the record so that the opposition to this change for rezoning is formally noted. If you rezone this now, what happens in the future? What dictates what type of buildings will be there in the future? 20 years down the road, when they possibly tear down this development, what's to ensure what will be put there in the future? You cannot. So we ask that you either not rezone this to light industrial or you only rezone it to a recreation or equally non-invasive residential zoning. The fact is that there are many other options available for this land. You said as much at the last meeting. There are clearly other options that are better, that won't have such a horrendous impact on the residents and are less invasive and harmful to the community and the residents. I would like to address the man who responded to the arguments at the last meeting.
I think that's enough. I'm gonna bring it back to the board. Thank you for your comments. Does anyone from the planning commission wish to either ask any questions or offer any comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Turner.
I was not at the last meeting. I had some business I had to attend to, but I read the letters. I did read the letters. And I got a clear understanding of what the concerns were that were raised by the residents. I've also seen what the applicant has done to take what they had before to get where we're at today. They've worked with the township and the planning commission to redevelop their plan. They've reworked it. They listened to the residents' concerns from the last meeting, and there were many voices about what they felt were important for them to address. They've modified their plan to address the concerns that were raised by the residents at the last meeting. It's been demonstrated that the property, yeah, we all would like recreation, we all would like parks, but the property cannot be developed as zoned residential. It cannot realistically and practically and legally be developed as residential because of the environmental issues, long-standing environmental issues on the site. Our master plan indicates the site is recommended for light manufacturing. We can't just go about rezoning property to whatever we would like to rezone it to when the master plan lays out an overall development pattern for a certain section of the township. So that's important to remember. It was mentioned that the planning commission in the township is pretending that we care. Well, I don't know why that gentleman feels we're pretending. We're here for a second meeting, engaging in a pretty heated discussion and detailed discussion about a plan that's very important to residents who live in Central Park. I'm not pretending. I do want to hear what you have to say, and I've taken all of the information into account when looking at this plan. So I am certainly not pretending, and I can tell you, I know my colleagues up here, and I know the board, they are not pretending either. So again, I'm not sure exactly why that gentleman feels that way. Now, I understand when we talk about rezoning property, I've been around a little while, I understand when we talk about rezoning, we're talking about change, and change is not always, sometimes it can be a little bit worrisome. I certainly understand that. But the property in question cannot be developed as residential. We all have to keep that in mind. And there may be, as Mr. Moffitt said, there may be some environmental issues that come into play that would limit and restrict commercial development on there. We have to take all of this into consideration. And one other important thing to remember is we're looking at a PUD, a planned unit development. What that does is that gives the township and the residents and the planning commission the ability to negotiate improvements to a plan like this, whereas another process would not. Straight rezoning would not. Any other process would not. We get to demand what we want to see done with this property. We demanded that, and I agree that the initial plan, the buildings were way too close to the residential buildings to the south. I agree. They moved them further north. They increased the berm and they put a fence on top of the berm to address the concerns raised by the residents. So I'm taking all of this into account when I look at this, is what has the developer done to listen carefully to what the planning commission said, what the township said, what most importantly, what the residents have said, and then looking at it, and they've come back and we're looking at a revised plan. I'm taking all of that into account. I certainly hear what everybody is saying, but believe me, we're not pretending. And this is a very transparent process, as this Zoom meeting shows, as these meetings always show. So that's what I wanted to say, Mr. Chairman. I hope I didn't bore you with my comments, but that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Not at all. Never, Mr. Turner.
Thank you.
Wow. Maybe not never.
Once in a while, yeah.
Once in a while. Anyone else on the board wish to comment?
I do. I have a question
Okay.
for the applicant, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Moore.
So the berm that is proposed and that you had given an example from your Kansas City project, that picture was, I guess, a little bit confusing. It just looked kind of barren and not a lot of landscaping. Is this going to be heavily landscaped? And the other question that I had too, as far as one of the residents proposed or had mentioned that the berm doesn't continue along the eastern edge of the property. And you had mentioned your response was because of the tree line. Isn't there a way to continue that all the way down so the berm is across that eastern edge of the property and with landscaping as well too?
Yeah, thanks for those questions. So in regards to the picture that I showed, that was more in reference to the wings we're putting on the building. The landscape code in that location is much less than the landscape code in Shelby Township. So we will follow the landscape code here, which actually is pretty intensive and requires a lot of trees and shrubs to be planted along the property line. And in fact, we actually are taking some of the landscaping from the front of the building and moving it, or from the north side and moving it to the south side, and then in order to further beef up the landscaping along that berm. So while that picture may look a little light on landscaping, it will be much different than what you will see at the final PUD when we submit our official landscape plan.
That picture didn't have the berm. Had no berm on it. It hadn't been constructed yet. If you were building one, right?
It did have a berm. I think the angle was sort of deceiving to it since it was sort of a bird's eye angle. But there was a berm on that project, but not the entire length of the property. The other comment about the berm extending the whole way, due to having to meet existing grades at the property line and sloping up at an angle that's safe to maintain, we can't build a 20-foot tall berm all the way to the property line. So we have to build it to a certain extent and start to slope it down in order to meet the grades that are on the Ford Field side of the property, which is why we have to stop short of the property line. And then there are some trees there that we are trying to save right along the property line.
Commissioner Moore, anything else? Was that satisfactory?
No, not really. I didn't like, I mean, isn't there something more you could do landscaping wise than towards the end? I understand you have to slope the berm at the end, but of the property, but the residents, as far as the noise, aren't they still susceptible? I would think they're still susceptible to that noise. I just, isn't there a way to continue that?
Am I able to share my screen again to show the landscaping around the corner there?
Yeah, go ahead.
You should be able to now.
Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay, so again, this isn't our final landscape plan, but this is a good illustration of the proposed plants. So all of these symbols that you see are the proposed plants. So our berm is going to stop over in this this general vicinity, but we do have plants, trees, evergreens that wrap this corner. So that should help, I guess, mitigate the sound that's coming around that corner.
Frankly, most of that sound's going to come from the little leaguers in the summer.
Right. Yeah. And again, just to reiterate, this is car parking on this side. So, the eastern side doesn't have any of the truck docks facing it, as I mentioned before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to comment?
Mr. Chairman, we have some more hands raised from the public.
That's okay. Now we've moved on from that.
Okay.
So. Okay. If there are no other questions or any questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Turner.
Given that this is a preliminary process, the first step in this for more discussion, I'm going to make a motion to forward to the Township Board conditional rezoning petition number 6-20 and preliminary PUD site plan number 20-22 PUD 7 for North Point Development requesting to be rezoned from R12 multiple family low rise and R1C one family residential to light manufacturing, and the preliminary plan unit development with the finding that the proposal has merit and has the potential to meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance and applicable PUD requirements to allow filing for final PUD review based on the following. The proposed rezoning and land use plan is consistent with the land use pattern recommended in the township's adopted master plan. The current zoning pattern in this area does not fully conform to the established development plan. The deed restriction placed on this property by the current owner and the physical characteristics restricts the property from being developed as zoned. The planned unit development plan has sufficient access to a major thoroughfare, and the proposed use will not interfere with or discourage the appropriate development and use of adjacent land and buildings or unreasonably affect their value.
Is there support of that motion? Support by opponent? Are there any questions on the motion? Hearing none. And then with the roll call, if you could also, when you vote, also state the community in which you're still taking the call. Is that correct, Mr. Kirk? You can nod.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Turner.
Yes. Shelby Township.
Mr. Rapone.
Yes, Shelby Township.
Mr. Snyder.
Yes, Shelby Township.
Mr. Grott. I'm sorry, you're muted, Mr. Grott. There you go.
I'm voting no, and I am in Shelby Township.
Okay. Commissioner Moore.
No, Shelby Township.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yes, Shelby Township.
Commissioner Meredith.
Yes, Shelby Township.
And the chair votes yes in Shelby Township. So the next step in this process, our recommendation will be referred to the board and put on agenda for the board to act on. So that would be the next step if you wanted to communicate. And I want to thank everyone for their participation. Next item under old business, site plan number 18-19, Frank DePonio. Ms. Misich, is the petitioner here? Do you know?
I don't see that he is, Chairman Moffett, but
why don't if you give an overview and then we'll act.
Sure. This was a site plan industrial building that was approved back in 2018. Due to COVID, it's been taking Mr. DePonio some time in getting this site plan going in with the uncertainties of COVID. I think he kind of held off a little bit, but he's ready to move on with the plan and just asked for an extension for a 2-year period. I don't have any problems with this request. We've had a number of these in the past year, and there's nothing unusual that would prohibit him from moving forward with this plan at this time.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions for the petitioner or for the planner? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Moore.
I move to extend site plan 18-19 for Frank depanyo, DNR Land Development LLC, located on Simone Drive, north side of 23 Mile Road between Van Dyke and Mound, parcel number 23-07-16-376-018 for a period of 2 years starting on February 19th, 2021, and will expire on February 19th, 2023.
Second.
Voting to bring us. Been moved by Moore, support by Grott. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none. Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner
Shelby
Grott?
Township.
Yes,
Grott?
Shelby Township.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Yes, Shelby Township.
Commissioner Meredith?
Yes, Shelby Township.
Commissioner Rapone?
Yes, Shelby Township.
Commissioner Snyder?
Yes, Shelby Township.
Commissioner Turner?
Yes, Shelby Township.
And the chair votes yes, also in Shelby Township. Next, planning director's report.
I don't have anything at this time, Chairman.
Okay. Business from the floor. Does anyone wish to comment on anything?
If anyone's calling in from their phone, they can hit *9 to raise their hand. It doesn't look like we have anyone, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. Seems Mr. Dalu, although I'm sure he's riveted to the television and watching this. His term had expired, and he's so no longer on the board. You want to thank him for his participation. He was a very good member to this board, and the community was well serviced by his volunteering his time and his efforts here. So. But he was always my go-to guy to adjourn. So I'm going to go to Mr. Turner. You can be the adjourner guy now.
Well, in his honor, Mr. Chairman, I will move to adjourn.
Excellent. Do we have support?
Support.
Moved and supported. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks.
Good night,
Be
everybody.
well.
Good
Get your
night.
shot.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.